so much for having me today. It's a really great pleasure to speak for the Warwick International Development Society. And yeah, I'm sorry about the delay as well. I got a bit caught up in traffic here, but I'm here now, so hopefully that's all good. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to talking to you today about Ecosia and just giving you some more of an insight into their projects. And if there's anyone which isn't using Ecosia yet, hopefully this presentation will persuade you to maybe make the switch. And yeah, just a brief introduction. So my name is Fred Henderson, and I work for Ecosia's marketing and communications team. So my job title is Partnership and Collaborations Manager. So if there's any businesses or any companies which would like to work alongside Ecosia, whether that's a green initiative where our values align, I'll sort of look at that partnership opportunity and see if this is something that would be beneficial to us. And I'm also carrying on the Ecosia on Campus campaign, which I started when I was at university, which I'll be talking a little bit more about as well. So I was invited to do an internship at Ecosia this summer, so it was a 3-month internship to carry on the projects I've been working on. But yeah, luckily for me, Ecosia is expanding quite a lot at the moment, and it made sense for them to keep me on. So I'm a recent employee of Ecosia, but I've been in communications with them for over a year now, running the Ecosia on Campus campaign. So yeah, so it's really exciting to be carrying on the work that I started when I was at university. And so mainly for this presentation, I'm aiming just to basically go through some of the most frequently asked questions. So the things that students ask me when I attend student fairs, about Ecosia, how does it make money, to how does it decide where it plants trees, and so hopefully this presentation will answer some of those questions. Yeah, there'll be time dedicated at the end to where I can answer any questions, and yeah, I really hope that we can have a discussion as well. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind doing the next slide. So yeah, how many of you have actually heard of Ecosia, and how many of you are already using Ecosia? Okay, so the majority of you here. I mean, that makes sense. It's a talk about Ecosia, so I'm sure most of you are already going to be using it. And so I'd really like to show you through this presentation just the impact that your searches are having, and to explain how Ecosia chooses its tree planting partners, so you as ID students can sort of have can feel encouraged that this is an organisation that you're proud to support. And also, if anyone isn't using Ecosia yet, hopefully this would be the chance to start doing so. So yeah, as you know, Ecosia is an internet search engine, a bit like Google or Bing, but instead it uses its profits to fund tree planting projects across the globe. So it works out that roughly every 45 internet searches that you do in Ecosia will fund the planting of a tree. This will be somewhere that's either facing deforestation or where the trees will have a positive environmental or social impact. So Ecosia has planted over 70 million trees so far. It reached that milestone a couple of weeks ago. And when it decides where to plant trees, it's often in biodiversity hotspots, which are areas where there are only there are only certain types of trees, or species, or plant species, or animals which are in these areas. So these are places where the trees will really have a positive environmental impact. And so there's 8 million Ecosia users worldwide, and this figure is actually, we're kind of revising this figure at the moment. This kind of represents the number of daily users and the number of users which have been using it for quite a while, as opposed to people which have picked up Ecosia and they use it for a few days and then stop using it. So that 8 million is probably a lot higher than what that is. For example, in recent weeks, Ecosia has been giving results for over 105 million search queries in each week. So this number of 8 million users needs to kind of reflect that soon. So yeah, one of the questions I'm always asked is, how does it actually work? I love the idea that I can plant trees with my internet searches, but how does this come about? It's it's something that it isn't immediately obvious how search engines make money. But Ecosia makes money just like any other search engine, and that's through advertising. So when you type in something into Ecosia, it will return results which are relevant to what you put into the search bar, and if these results match any ads, then it will display some ads related to the content you've typed in. So for example, if you type in sustainable hoodie into Ecosia, this will come up with different options from various websites. For example, ASOS might have a sustainable hoodie displayed in the search results. And if you click on this advert from ASOS, then this will generate a revenue for Ecosia to plant trees with. But if you then go through to buy that hoodie, then that's what's called a conversion, and this will generate even more revenue for Ecosia. So it's hard to say how much each ad click is worth, and this is because there's a lot of variations depending on the words that people want that advertisers want to use, and also the demographic can change as well as to how much ad clicks are worth. So, but roughly it works out about. When we take into account that not every Ecosia user will click on ads each time that they search for something, it generally will work out at 0.5 euro cents every search that you do though. And so Ecosia works in partnership with Microsoft Bing to deliver monetizable search results. And this basically means that Ecosia doesn't deal directly with advertisers, but instead, if ASOS wants to advertise on through a search engine and have specific words tied to their products, then they would approach Microsoft Bing rather than approaching Ecosia, for example. But with that said, Ecosia does have its own algorithms, and it does promote certain businesses which which have accreditations for their commitment to the environment, for example. So the results are powered through Bing, but Ecosia has its own algorithms too. So yes, Ecosia is completely transparent with all of their finances, and they publicly publish all of their reports online. And for example, here you can see in August that they had 1.7 million in income, and 855,000 was put towards planting trees. That's in the August report. And if you want to see any more of these reports, they're all on the Ecosia blog, and those are some of the blog posts which get the most views because people are want to ensure that Ecosia is doing what they say they're doing. So yes, at least 80% of Ecosia's profits goes towards financing tree planting projects, and the other 20% is put into a reserve for Ecosia to commit to other green initiatives that it would like to action. For example, last year Ecosia put in a bid for the Hambach forest in Germany, which is an ancient forest which was being under threat from a mining organisation which wanted to cut down the forest. And there was multiple activist groups which made tree houses to stop this to save the ancient forest. And Ecosia put in a bid of €1 million to the mining company to say, look, we don't want you to cut this down. We'll offer you this for it. And that was declined, but it did help raise awareness for the activist campaigning that was going on around the forest, and ultimately the mining company had to leave the forest alone. So it was a success that Ecosia was able to input into because of what was in their reserve. And also in 2017, Ecosia purchased all of its own solar panels. And it wouldn't have been able to do this unless it had put money aside in each month, basically. And yeah, if you want to do the next slide, there's a video. I think if you just click the image, that should play.
So here's the thing. The climate emergency is upon us. And if we want to make it through this, we have to plant millions of trees, which Ecosia does. But that's not going to be enough. We also have to say goodbye to fossil fuels once and for all, and accelerate the transition to clean, renewable energy. All the experts agree.
One of our highest priorities as a society has to be cuts to greenhouse gas emissions. So as a result, the move to renewable energies is absolutely critical as we attempt to try and address climate change.
Ecosia started building solar plants in 2018. This way, we now feed enough renewable energy into the grid to power every single one of your Ecosia searches with 100% renewable energy. But there's more.
So by running on 100% renewable energy and by using our surplus income in order to finance tree planting projects across the world, we are much more than just climate neutral. Each surge is removing substantial amounts of CO2 from the air.
By planting trees, we absorb CO2. And by producing renewable energy, we prevent CO2 from being released. But that's still not quite good enough for us. In 2019, we're becoming the first company to produce twice as much renewable energy as we need. This way, we feed enough renewable energy into the grid to power your searches and to crowd out dirty energy.
So when you're using Ecosia, you're not just fighting climate change by planting trees, you're not just running on 100% of renewable energy, but you are actively supporting the energy transition to a fully renewable energy system.
With the climate emergency upon us, we have no time to waste. By using Ecosia, you can both remove CO2 from the atmosphere by planting trees and prevent CO2 from being released in the first place by accelerating the transition to a sustainable, renewable future.
And so, what's so fascinating is what other things can you do in your daily life that remove CO2 from the atmosphere? There's literally nothing that we can do really. Well, there's accessible as individuals to really have that impact. And actually, yeah, there was a link on the last slide as well. I'm not sure if you saw there was a Guardian article last week about Google and how so Google claims to run on renewable energy, but it does this through large-scale offsetting, and it came out last week that Google has been financing climate-denying think tanks, which have then gone on to lobby the Trump administration to reject the Paris Agreement. So, the argument that Google runs on renewable energy as well. It's it doesn't run on fully sustainable energy. It achieves this through carbon offsetting, and then it also is it's providing money to think tanks which are damaging as well. So yeah, another thing I'd like to mention is that Ecosia is a B certified organisation, and this is a third-party accreditation where Ecosia has been assessed on the impact to its workers, its customers, the community and the environment. And this is only awarded to companies with a high level of public transparency. And so with this accreditation, it should build faith that everything that Ecosia says that it does, it does, because it has to have that this level of transparency in order to have an accreditation like this. And secondly, the majority of Ecosia's shares are owned by the Purpose Foundation, and this is a legally binding framework, which means that Ecosia can't ever be bought or sold by larger tech giants for a profit. And it means that Ecosia always has to, it means Ecosia can focus on its purpose, which is to plant trees, opposed to having to increase shareholder value. And so, what's quite interesting about this is that, with a standard organisation, where their shares are publicly owned, it's all about making as much money as possible so that the shareholders get paid dividends and to increase shareholder value. But because Ecosia's shares are owned by this foundation, there's no external pressure from shareholders to make money, and instead Ecosia can focus on what it wants to do, which is plant trees. So yeah, Ecosia is a non-profit and purpose-driven organisation. I'd also like to say, it's totally privacy friendly as well. So it encrypts and anonymises all of the searches that you do, and it never collects any personally identifiable information on you. And this is another way that organisations like Google would make money. They collect data and then they sell that to third parties. And so, but Ecosia doesn't have that pressure from shareholders to increase value by doing things that it deems morally wrong, like selling personally identifiable information, for example. So yeah, that's probably enough about Ecosia's business model. Let's get on to the trees. So yes, Ecosia has 22 tree planting projects in 17 different countries. and it always aims to plant trees where they have the most positive environmental and social impact. Like I mentioned, biodiversity hotspots are where trees are needed most at the moment for their environmental aspect. But I studied anthropology at university. I'm sure there may be some of you which study anthropology as well. There's a lot of my friends at uni did a joint honours with ID and anthropology. Is there any anthropologists here? No. Oh, I thought there would be. Never mind. The case studies that I'll be presenting, I'll be emphasising the social impact that they bring to the communities. And just before I move on, I'll just mention a few of these here. So, like for example, in Senegal, the trees that Ecosia plants, they help to improve the soil fertility of the land, which leads to more varied crop yields. It also helps to regulate the flow of water to rivers. Madagascar is a country that's been heavily deforested recently. It's also another biodiversity hotspot. So it would be hard, we don't really have enough time to go through all of Ecosia's projects, but I've picked out a few which are of particular interest. This is Peter, and he is the Chief Tree Planting Officer at Ecosia. And it's his role to find the tree planting projects that Ecosia takes part in. So Ecosia doesn't actually plant trees themselves, but instead they find tree planting NGOs which are already established to plant trees for them. So it's very much like a contractual basis that Ecosia has with its NGO partners in order to plant trees. So we're sort of inundated by organisations that want to plant trees with us, but Peter sets a very high standard and the specific criteria of what the NGOs need to present to us. They need to be highly transparent and ensure that the trees that they say they're planting, and there needs to be a clear communication about how they report back on the trees that they're planting. Each NGO project is assessed on the number of trees that they can plant, and the question that Peter was asked is how scalable is it? Are we just going to plant 5,000 trees here and then that's it, or can this be part of a wider reforestation project where they're reforesting a larger landscape? Yes, Ecosia's reforestation projects should bring value to both people and nature. And like I mentioned, we often plant in biodiversity hotspots, which are areas of the planet where there are unique animal and plant species that can't be found anywhere else in the world. These biodiversity hotspots are often in danger of suffering from deforestation, caused by things like agriculture, illegal logging, and mining. What Ecosia likes to do is always plant native tree species, so these are the kinds of trees which have grown in the area before and so are most likely to survive going forward. And I'm not sure the next slide. I'll go back to the other slide actually. So one of the other questions I'm often asked is how does Ecosia know that its trees are going to survive? And Ecosia only records trees that are going to live longer than 3 years within its total tree count, because 3 years is a sufficient amount of time for baby saplings to really sort of settle into the soil, and by the time they're 3 years old, they're often robust enough to survive in the landscape where they've been planted. And Ecosia uses satellite technology to ensure that to keep an eye on the trees and make sure that they're still growing. As I mentioned, it's required from all the partners to have a high level of reporting to ensure that the trees are surviving. I thought I'd just explain how the tree counter works actually. So, if you go onto the Ecosia homepage, it's constantly ticking up one tree at a time. I think it's every 0.8 seconds it will go up. But this isn't from somebody clicking on an ad and then that just makes the number go up. It doesn't really work like that. Instead, when Peter signs a contract with a new tree planting NGO, he'll add that total onto the total trees that we're planting. So let's say we're at 70 million here and it's ticking up. Peter's already about here adding on more trees. So the number is slowly increasing to meet with how many trees we've got going on at the time. So that tree counter is, if anything, we've planted more trees than what the tree counter says at the moment, and it will just continue increasing as we add more projects. And the other thing I'll mention is it's just kind of how conservative we are about adding to that tree counter too. So basically, if we know that in a certain region the baby saplings have a 25% mortality rate, and you know they're not likely, the 25% isn't likely to survive, and we plant 1,000 trees, and then we would only include like 750 trees within the counter. So this basically means that, you know, if we know the trees are going to struggle to survive, then we'll underestimate how much we put into the counter as well. So if anything, Ecosia's planted more than 7 million trees, but we're, you know, very careful to ensure that the number there is the number that is trackable. And so yes. So yeah, this is a project with Green Ethiopia, which is the NGO that we work with in Ethiopia. And yes, it's an NGO that's been around for 15 years, restoring degraded landscapes and empowering local communities. And the CIO Women Group has decided to grow a forest in order to protect the community from deforestation, soil erosion and water scarcity. The women here say that the forests are highly political and a matter of war and peace, because without clean water and the fertile soil that the trees create, this can lead to civil unrest when the resources there are scarce. And yes, so the image here on the right is like a tomato field in the middle of barren dry plains, and this has only been made possible through planting trees which have increased the amount of shade and improved the flow of water through the soil to make something like this possible. You know, before this land was just barren, but now it's you know, is a source of income for the communities there. There's a really nice video here. So Almaz is one of Ecosia's tree planting heroes. So this is kind of what we refer to the NGO leaders that are managing the project. So this is from Ethiopia.
After we planted the forest, the river came back. Its banks are full of water, even in the dry season. My name is Almaz. I'm from Safa in Ethiopia, and I have 2 children, 2 hens, 2 goats, and 1 husband. Before planting the trees, I collected sand from the river for 20 cents. It was hard work and dangerous too. But my life is different now. With other women in my village, I am planting a forest on communal land. Thanks to the trees that Ecosia and Green Ethiopia have provided, our fields have become more productive. Collectively, we were able to save almost $500. We kept track of our savings in a little book. Before, we hardly had any savings at all. Some families did not even have enough food, but now we can all send our children to school. On my farm, I grow coffee and bananas. Since I planted the shade trees and fruit trees here, my yield has improved because the sun no longer dries out the soil. Every year, I harvest more coffee than before and sell it on the market. We want to continue reforesting our land. As women are pioneers. With your support, we have improved our land and the lives of our families. If you don't forget us, I know that we will continue to see change. It will be outstanding.
And so you may have noticed that there wasn't many men in that video, and this is mainly because that during the tree planting season, there usually wasn't much work for them to do on the land there, and the men would go into a nearby city to search for more work. But now the tree planting project has, you know, provided the women with something to do when before there was no other opportunities, and also it's making this time of year profitable for them, whereas before they would have to rely on, you know, the husbands to make money in the city. But now, you know, it's a very much a women-led project, which is now using that time of year, and it's becoming profitable. Some of the other projects I thought I'd mention are from Uganda. So this guy here, Joram, he's a tobacco farmer in Uganda, And what happened here was he had cleared quite large areas of forest to grow tobacco, and the NGO in the area, made the connection that. The problem was that the water from the community bore well had stopped supplying so much water, and then the NGO realised that this was caused by the cutting back of the forest. And then, since Ecosia has planted trees there, this has helped to regulate the flow of water to the well, and Joram is now growing other crops which kind of help with the sustainability of the ecosystem. And so, that really just shows, the impact that trees have. They're not just removing carbon from the atmosphere, but they're sort of regulating whole ecosystems. The image on the right is of a chimpanzee. This is from the Jane Goodall Institute. And what was interesting about this is that it's 2 areas of forest which are separate from each other, but the Ecosia project is building like a forest corridor to connect the 2 together. And this means that the chimpanzees were able to easily migrate between the 2 forests. So that's the aim of that project. Actually, what I would just say here is, I should have mentioned this earlier, but each Ecosia project has a unique purpose. Like, the trees that they plant always serve a different reason, depending on the people there and depending on the environment. Ecosia doesn't just turn up somewhere and throw seeds on the ground. It's a holistic approach as to how these trees can best benefit the communities and the environment as well. So yes, on the left here is an image of the Atlantic forest, which is an ancient forest on the east coast of Brazil, and basically all of this should be covered in green trees, the issue of it here is that it's been so deforested in the past that when the water sort of trickles down the mountain, it just goes straight to the bottom. It doesn't fertilise the soil on the mountain slope. And so when you see like a mountain like this, it should really have trees all over the slopes, because this is a sign that the soil is still fertile, it's still good, rather than the water just draining straight to the bottom, because it's very hard to grow on that soil now, and it needs a lot of trees in order to fix that. So this Atlantic forest, only 8% of it remains, and why it's really important to reforest this area is because this is what could become of the Amazon. This is, if we continue this rate of deforestation, there are already examples like this where landscapes have been destroyed, and I think that by focusing our planting on rebuilding areas like this, it really sort of will help with the conversation about what's happening in the Amazon too. And so the next image is from Peru, where the people were felling lots of trees in order to cook food and for heating and things. But Ecosia, working with the local NGO, has advised the people now to use branches from the higher parts of the trees without actually felling the whole thing, and this has helped to improve the trees on the mountain slopes there as well. So the project's in Indonesia. So Indonesia is one of the 35 biodiversity hotspots. In the last 30 years, Indonesia has lost 20% of its total forest cover due to the palm oil industry. The cutting back of such vast forest landscapes has led to fresh water shortages, the destruction of ecosystems, and severe floods, and endangering orangutan habitats. Monocultures like palm oil, it's the most profitable export in Indonesia. And so, part of tackling the problem part of wanting to protect this biodiversity hotspots and orangutan habitats in the ancient forest there is providing another source of income for the people which live there. And the trees that Ecosia plants in Indonesia include the sugar tree, which is natural for the environment and great for the ecosystem. So the sugar trees are also a fantastic source of income for farmers and giving them the opportunity to restore economic stability without having to use their land for palm oil. And so part of the project in Indonesia was to create a 25,000 hectare landscape across a mountain range, which is the ideal climate for orangutan. Because orangutans can't live in monocultures like palm oil. Like, they need an abundance of a different variety of trees in order to survive. You know, if you look at this image, you know, it looks lovely. You know, I was like, oh, that's great. There's trees there. That's cool. But you know, this isn't natural. This is you know a dangerous monoculture. And so Christian, the Ecosia CEO, the first project that he visited was in Indonesia, and he basically said the contrast in climate from going to a forest to going to a palm oil plantation was so different. For example, in a place like that, it's so much hotter, and it just feels unnatural compared to the, you know, the humidity in the forest. And yeah. Okay, so Burkina Faso is Ecosia's largest project, and so since 2014, Ecosia Searchers have financed the planting of 1.5 million trees and restored over 12,000 hectares of land. So the tree planting projects here restore deserted landscapes, their form of fertility, it curbs violent conflict through creating employment, and improves nutrition through agroforestry. I've kind of touched on this about some of the other projects, but you know, when you plant trees, it improves the soil fertility, which means that you have higher crop yields, and also you know, improves the nutrition of that food as well. And this is a huge scale tree planting project, which has, you know, empowered a whole community, and it's through the input of this guy here. So I actually met Sado at the Ecosia 50 million tree. It was like a party to celebrate 50 million trees that they planted, and he gave a speech. It was in French, but it was being translated. I can't speak French, so his final remark has really stuck with me. So he basically said that not everybody in his village in Burkina Faso knows what the internet is, but they all know about Ecosia. They all know what Ecosia is, or you know, the impact that it's had. And yeah, you can do the next slide. So yeah, I'm now just going to talk a little bit about Ecosia on campus, which is sort of primarily what I'm involved with at Ecosia, and just kind of tell you a little bit about what I did when I was at university. I went to Sussex and studying anthropology, and in my second year I was working on a project with two friends, and we were all using Ecosia for our searches, and we sort of had this eureka moment where we thought, oh, let's convince the university to switch to Ecosia. And so, you know, we launched a campaign in the spring term of 2018, and you know, we ran a Facebook page, and we were at the Refreshers Fair handing out leaflets, and we pitched for funding from the School of Global Studies, and you know, managed to get their support. Arranged meetings with IT, and eventually we had a 10-minute meeting with the Vice Chancellor where we sat down and said, look, this is how many trees you could plant if you switch to Ecosia, basically, and you know, this is how many trees you've already planted. And you know, luckily he thought it was a great idea, and so Sussex made the switch to Ecosia in October last year, and has now planted over 14,000 trees, which is great, because that's just, you know, people searching online, you know, and the thing is, it looks good for the university as well. You know, the university can show that it's, you know, it's engaging with sustainable issues, and it's encouraging its students to do so. It's a win-win sort of situation we found. So I then went on to help other students to campaign at their universities, and it's now at 70 universities worldwide. I'm literally inundated by students that want to run campaigns, and like 2 weeks ago I was in Paris meeting students, student organisations there, and then I toured the UK for Freshers Fairs. I went to Kent and UCL, Imperial, Bristol, which had an amazing, it was like, Bristol Freshers Fair was sick, by the way, like, it was like being at a festival, like, really cool uni. I'm not sure how good your Freshers Fair is though, but you know, there's lots of universities which are now campaigning, and we're aiming to plant 100,000 trees by the end of the year. And to meet that target, we really need some other universities to make the switch to Ecosia. I haven't checked how we're doing. I mean, last time I checked, we were about 50,000, but there's only a couple more months left in the year, so we really need some universities to switch. I mean, I'm quite hopeful that some of them will. There's about 5 universities in the UK which are using Ecosia, including Swansea, Bath Spa, Sunderland recently made the switch, Suffolk are in the process of doing so. I've got my fingers crossed for Bristol. And so this is something that, if you can get your Vice-Chancellor to really engage with it, and you can explain that, Ecosia is completely transparent in what it does, this is something that can make the university look good. It's just about having those conversations and sort of ironing out any worries they might have until, you can convince your university to switch. Which brings me on to the next slide, which is Warwick on Ecosia. So I was contacted a couple of weeks ago by Louis and Joseph, who are sat in the corner over there, wanting to launch Ecosia on Campus campaign here at Warwick. So one of the first things that I did for them was set them up with a URL so they can track how many trees they've planted. So if you download Ecosia or you add the extension to your browser via that link there, then this means that your trees will contribute to the Warwick total. And this is really important for the campaign because it can show that even with a small group of students using Ecosia, via this link, over a course of months you can plant hundreds of trees, and then this means that the campaign will then be able to show the Vice-Chancellor, look, we've planted hundreds of trees. This gets them to imagine the impact, what the impact would be if the university switched. So yeah, please give them a follow on Facebook and Instagram, and if you'd like to support the campaign further, then yeah, please speak to me at the end, or I'm sure Louis and Joseph would be really keen to have your support as well. The impact of the university switching can lead to the planting of tens of thousands of trees over the years, and it's a great achievement as well if you can campaign and really lobby an institutional change at your university. It's one that benefits the environment. It's a good thing to be doing.